Is it cynical of me? And it's okay for you to say, yes, Brianna, this is cynical and not at all rooted in reality. But is it cynical for me to think that there's some part of, well, that part of the reason that some of these groups are unwilling to throw their hat in the ring right now, and support this movement is less because of the potential for tactical failure? Because the reality it is, from my perspective, and correct me if you think I'm wrong, that the downsides are very meager. To your point, if you come for the queen, you better not miss. Sure, but they have plenty of votes to do that if that's what they want to do. I mean, I think that this wouldn't be pitched as we're going to get Medicare for all. This would be pitched as we're going to get a floor vote to start a conversation, and therefore there's no risk of like depressing people. Quite the opposite. I think that folks are very galvanized around kind of the left showing a little muscle regardless of what happens. And so what it feels like is that there is a certain cohort of the left that doesn't want to look like losers, that is demoralized in a post-Bernie world. A lot of pundits who are really, to your point, involved in this prediction game and who are spending a lot of time saying this won't manifest in Medicare for all, almost as, a justification for why they're not going to be hopeful and try, instead of doing the organizing that they're talking so much about.
Right. Well, I do think there is an orientation of groups, particularly donor-funded groups, to show victories.
Mm.
And so you have to follow the money in the case of, advocacy organizations too, to some extent. I think, yes, they don't want to look like losers. They've invested quite a bit in trying to show that we've made progress, right? That, hey, we had a hearing in rules, we had a hearing in ways and means, we had a hearing in labor. When the truth of the matter is, of course, our high point was when Bernie introduced his Medicare for All bill with those senators. And we've been in decline since then. The industry's been more aggressive. We haven't really mounted an effective counteroffensive, except in Iowa and Nevada. The campaign did. And credit to some of your fine work as well. So I think, that was a huge lift. And we fought back hard against a very, as we were saying, against a deep pocket adversary. So I do think those groups don't want to look weak, but also again, if we can still have that debate and we can actually have more than 15 minutes and we can actually make it substantive and we can actually have a real shot at getting deeply into the media and getting advocates. On MSNBC, imagine a single payer advocate on MSNBC.
Right.
That should be, I think, part of our objective, a key part of our objective. If you get on MSNBC because, hey, here's the person who's trying to take out, Nancy Pelosi because she won't do Medicare for all. I'm open to that. I am open to that.
Michael, you've been around for the four biggest healthcare fights of the past 30 years: Hillary Care, the Medicare expansion under the Bush administration, the ACA, and then the fight to repeal ACA, or rather prevent the repeal of ACA. And I'm curious about what lessons that we could take from that you want, having had this behind the scenes view, to let people know about. And like one specific question I would have along those lines is, what do you make of what I would call the Rahm Emanuel Barack Obama strategy, which is that, well, we all saw what happened to Hillary Care once the insurance company soured on it. So therefore, any kind of meaningful health insurance reform, we're going to have to give, big insurance companies a seat at the table. Their lobbyists are going to have to write some of it. And at the end of the day, they're going to have to make more money, or else that's the only possible way we're going to be able to increase coverage. And that seems to be where the leadership of the current Democratic Party is right now in terms of strategy.
Right. I think there's a political calculation and a policy calculation. I think the political calculation is exactly what you say, which is we can't beat the industry, so we're going to have to accommodate them. And the policy strategy is it'll be good enough. We'll throw enough subsidies. We'll expand the public programs. It'll be fine. And the people who really vote will be fine, right? And the union members will be okay. So we don't really have to change it. And if we try, we're just going to get beat to crap and lose. Yeah. And so let's accommodate the industry. I just don't think that worked. It hasn't worked. It's not going to work. And why do we think it's going to work? But I also think that the lesson to derive from that is not that somehow we're going to, on the strength of the single payer movement, transform the debate and all of a sudden be able to beat the industry. I think we should do the things I suggested. vilify them, make them into tobacco, expose the money, expose the politicians. But what we have to understand is that we're not going to get Medicare for all if the minimum wage is $7.25. We're not going to get Medicare for all if state-sanctioned violence is a public health crisis destroying our community, or the pandemic is killing hundreds of thousands of people. Everything is everything. And look at what happened with the racial justice uprising. 25 million people in the streets, and the legislative response has not been equivalent, right? So look what we're up against. These movements are going to have to converge in some way. And Medicare for all has got to be the health justice wing of the broader social justice movement that demands these transformative programs and I think a transformative sense of solidarity. And that is what's going to win Medicare for all. And we're a siloed movement, very policy oriented, up against the richest industry, the most powerful industry in Congress. And we've got allies, powerful allies, organized people. But this organized money is nothing like we've ever taken on. And that's why I go back to presidential leadership. And so, Brianna, your question's right. Absent that, what can we do? And we've got to move things, I think, in such a way so that when we do have the opportunity to do it federally, we have the infrastructure that can actually win it.
So on our inaugural episode, our inaugural live stream the other day, Marcus Farrell, who was part of the
your inaugural live stream.
Virgil did not join me, but we were joined by Marcus Farrell, who was part of the 2016. I think his title was African American Outreach Coordinator, and his suggestion was to try to incorporate, to your point, something about the movement for Black lives as part of the package. He was talking about reparations, but I could see targeting, incorporating rather the specific movement around Black lives from the summer and police overreach, et cetera, in order to galvanize a broader segment of the population, practice intersectionality instead of just saying it over and over again as a buzzword, putting a different kind of pressure on Democratic Party leadership, since they all just put their kente cloths on and kneeled at the Capitol just a few months ago. And I think that there's something to that. There's obviously some risks that the more you pile on, the more there is for folks to object to. But it's also true that the more you pile on, the more there is for people to rally around. What do you think about linking kind of more explicitly the Medicare for all movement to a movement for Black lives, which does have as part of its agenda universal health care?
And single payer specifically.
Yeah.
I'm totally on this page, Brianna. This is exactly what I think we should do. And I've been trying to do it in a kind of beginning way. We did a series webinars, Black Health, Black Liberation, where we foregrounded kind of the triple crises of state-sanctioned police violence, the pandemic, and rampant fundamental inequality. Right. And say we need a comprehensive response to those issues, and foregrounding the issue of police brutality, because first of all, we have to acknowledge that. But secondly, so we're incorporating some of that work. We've been doing listening sessions with frontline organizations serving communities of color to say, look, you're like in an existential crisis. We get that. You're not going to be out there waving the flag for Medicare for all, but how can we integrate, right, the needs of your work and our organizing program? We've recalibrated the DSA Medicare for All organizing guide, putting up front the Medicare for All as an anti-racist demand against racial capitalism, right? Making that explicit. We've got a national strategy conference at the end of January. We're going to do a workshop called Campaign for Health Equity, a winning political strategy for single payer. And I want to link not only to the Black Lives Movement and the BREATHE Act, which I wish the BREATHE Act actually included Medicare for All. It's Medicaid expansion, does some other great things, but I wish it went all the way. But that, but also Representative Lee's one of the key drivers of the Health Equity Act, right, to deal directly with those issues within structural racism within healthcare. So that's another way we've got to integrate. So I think this is the only way to succeed, and we have to acknowledge that our movement is white and old and a little out of touch. And the thing that revitalized it was, the influx of young folks, mainly from DSA, but obviously that's got deficiencies too, in terms of breadth and reach. And so, and when I've certainly been schooled when a lot of Black folks, other people of color hear Medicare for all, as soon as they hear all, they figure, oh, that's not us.
Yeah, that's an uphill battle. And I know that there are a lot of folks who are going to be like, the whole point is it's a universal program. If you start emphasizing discrete groups, then you're undercutting its viability. But I think we cannot ignore the reality of what Bernie's vulnerabilities were in 2016, and he improved a lot in 2020, but they were still there. And it's that people feel like unless you're willing to articulate something specific for them, or at least characterize the universal program in a way that is directly appealing to a specific group, then they aren't wrong to assume, given historical precedent, that this universal program isn't going to end up touching their lives.